Humdrummity, humdrummity, humdrummity.
Hey, listener. Sometimes you just need to agree to disagree, even when you somewhat agree. Jack Kammer has some good intentions about men breaking free of stereotypes to become more empathetic and engaged parents. However, as the creator of male-friendly media, Jack's opinions on what is holding men back from reaching their potential is gonna make this podcast get a little spicy. I was somewhat hesitant about publishing this episode because I never intended this podcast to be a platform for confrontation. But I feel the ideas and arguments from both sides should be presented so you can decide where you stand on this topic. Tune in to find out what my guest views as the most sexist idea of all. All right, buckle up and let's get into it. Hi, Jack, and welcome to Humdrummity. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I'm very glad to be here.
Now, where in the world do we find you today?
You mean physically or in cyberspace?
I mean physically.
I'm in Maryland, between Baltimore and Washington.
I just want to get straight into this to talk about the main theme of our conversation today. And what I want to start with is, in your email signature, you put your title as mansplainer. So can you tell me why you chose that title and what does it mean to you?
Well, you know what the term mansplaining means?
Yes. Are you mansplaining it to me?
Yeah, I guess I always am, because I'm a man and I'm, and I am splaining it. Well, mansplaining is sort of a pejorative term that people who are not particularly friendly or sympathetic to men like to use to label what they see as very common behavior of a man daring or assuming that he has the right and the ability to explain something to a woman, as if it's ever possible for a man to know something about men that a woman doesn't already know. And so, we are criticized for many things, but one of them is that we mansplain. When a woman splains, she's just, an empowered woman who is fierce and strong and empowered and doesn't take any crap from anybody. When a man splains, he's kind of a jerk because he's a male chauvinist pig and is disrespectful to women for thinking that he has any business saying anything to a woman as if she doesn't already know it. I own my mansplainingness because the whole purpose of male-friendly media and the whole origin of male-friendly media goes back to when I was in my 30s. This was in 1982, where two women who were members of my co-ed softball team were talking to me about their boyfriends. And they had these tales of woe about their boyfriends. And at the end of their tales of woe about their boyfriends, they both said, 2 separate weeks, not together, "And so, he's a real jerk, don't you think?" Well, both times, all I could say was, well, maybe based on what you're saying, he's a real jerk. But, from my point of view, the word mansplaining hadn't been invented yet. But from my point of view as a man, based on what you're saying here, maybe the way it looks to him is such and such. And I don't even remember the details. And both times, after hearing my alternative explanation, they both said, "Oh my God, I never thought of that." And it was the need for a better representation of a male point of view that led me to call a radio station very shortly thereafter and say, "Hey, there's a problem here. The male point of view is not very well understood, maybe in part because it's not very well articulated, because men don't want to talk about this stuff. Let's do a radio show." And they said, yeah. And I did the radio show from 83 to 89. It was pretty successful on this radio station, and I've been mansplaining ever since.
Have you had any negative responses to, entitling yourself as a mansplainer?
Well, it's interesting that, you use the term entitling myself. We don't have any problem. We don't think anything of it when woman-splain to us about how horrible their lives are. And even worse, when they tell us how wonderful our lives are. Women do a lot of woman-splaining to men about men. Oh, it's the patriarchy. Oh, you guys are upset about feminism because you're losing all of your male privileges. That kind of thing. And, when they are talking about how wonderful it is to be a man and all of the wonderful male privileges we have, they are falling prey to the apex fallacy. They're looking at the top of the male hierarchy and saying, look at all those guys up there in the Fortune 500 CEO suites. It's not fair. Yeah, that's great. Fine. What they look at is the Fortune 500. What they don't look at is the misfortune 5 million, the men at the bottom of the hierarchy. So yeah, they're very good at woman-splaining, except I don't think they get the picture nearly as right as we men are able to do about women's situation, having heard 60 years worth of explanation of it. So basically, I think that men understand women's issues far better than women understand men's issues.
Well, and I'm not going to disagree with you that men don't have their issues, but as you point out, when you take this timeline of 60 years of hearing about women's issues, which I guess you could boil down to feminism. 60 years is not a long time in the history of humanity. So, that's only a couple generations. So now we're talking thousands of years of, male dominated society and males' issues taking the forefront of, the forefront of societal discussions.
Yes, it is important for us to be aware of women's issues, how sexism hurts women. But as a mansplainer, I like to say that the most sexist idea of all is that only women are ever harmed by sexism and only men are ever sexist. That to me is the most sexist idea of all. Now we are very familiar with talking about the male hierarchy. That's the male power structure. We get that. Even though we get it, we still don't get it very well because we focus disproportionately on the top of the male hierarchy, disproportionately much less on the men at the bottom of the male hierarchy. We don't even have a concept of a female power structure. But I, as a mansplainer, have done my best to try to come up with a representation, a graphic, physical representation of the female power structure. And we should not be surprised to know or to realize that it's not at all like the male power structure. It's not a hierarchy. The male power structure is a bit like a skyscraper. It's very vertical. One might even say very phallic. The female power structure is not vertical. It is not phallic. You can't see it from 30 miles away, like you can see the male power structure. You have to be closer to the female power structure to see it. And as a matter of fact, you have to be actually a little more sophisticated to see it. But whereas the male power structure is a skyscraper, the female power structure, maybe 2 stories tall, is more like a convention center. And all kinds of wonderful things happen in convention centers too. Important things, fun things, productive things, powerful things, networking, alliances, deals happening in the female power structure. Now, the male power structure has what you might think of as a $sign at the top. Sometimes I represent it as a lightning bolt because not all male power is economic, military power, government power as well. The female power structure doesn't have a $sign at the top. It doesn't have a lightning bolt at the top. the female power structure barely even has a top. It's only 2 or 3 stories tall. But what it has is a center. And at the center of the female power structure is something that is just as important to human happiness as the dollar sign. What it is at the center of the female power structure is a big red heart. And just as we entrusted men over the years to take care of getting the money, we entrust women to take care of emotions. We have done a much better job empowering women to have their share of taking care of the dollars than we have in entrusting and empowering men to have their fair share of emotions and relationships, expressing of feelings, mental health, empathy, primary relationships with kids. And that has to change.
Right. But you're saying that at this point, my understanding is what you're saying is that there seems to be an inordinate amount of sexism towards men that hasn't been uncovered, which may or may not be true, but that somehow men are at a disadvantage, a huge disadvantage because of the sexism, because of this last 60 years of feminism.
No, not just because of the last 60 years of feminism. These instances of sexism against men are vestiges of our human history, where it was required for the survival of our species for women to be specializing in one type of activity and men to be specializing in another type of activity. We have evolved a civilization that has made changes possible. Women have, over the past 100 or so years, from the time when they started campaigning for suffrage, they have demonstrated that the stereotypes or the limitations on their life options were no longer applicable, didn't need to be enforced, and were unfair and wrong. And that the disadvantages they suffered by being limited to their traditional female roles didn't need to be enforced anymore. Well, the same is true of men. It is very much expected for men to be physically strong, stoic, never to express fear, always be willing to risk their lives to protect women and children, and always be prepared mentally, psychologically, to jump into action, meaning we carry a mindset with us that might become necessary in a minute or two, but probably not.
In history, males' activities have been elevated so that those activities, going out, being the bread earner, bringing home the money, that sort of idea was elevated. And therefore that idea was more powerful. Whereas what women were doing was not equally as valued. And that's where we get to this idea of feminism coming about, right? Because feminism really is just the idea of equality. So you get suffragettes. We want the vote. Well, why shouldn't you have the vote?
And I would say that the definition of femininity also needs to be redefined in ways other than the ways in which women have been happy to redefine it. There is such a thing as toxic femininity if there is such a thing as toxic masculinity. Now, let's go back to what you said before. We'd have some very, very, very basic differences of opinion and points of view. The idea that men's work was elevated because it was truly seen as more noble and valuable and moral and important to a happy human life than women's work is exactly wrong in my view. The elevation of the importance of men's work was, in my view, and I think it makes perfect sense, It was a way of trying to get men to do this very unattractive thing. Go work in the factory, go dig ditches, things that were not very well connected, things that were not very relational, things that didn't have a lot of emotional value to them. But, oh, you lucky man, you get to go and dig a ditch and bring home a paycheck. You lucky man. And look at us poor women. We're stuck at home with our children, raising our children. How demeaning and terrible is that for us? I just don't buy that at all.
See, but I think you're diminishing that value, and that's one of the points of feminism, is that the work being done by women at home should be equally valued as what men are doing, right?
I am saying,
and also the idea that women may not want to be at home.
It should be equally available to men as an option. It should be equally available to men as an option. Yes, a woman might
but
not
that's
want
not
that.
Women haven't prevented men from going.
Oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes,
if I went to my wife and said, you know what, hon, I am going to do all the child rearing, I am going to do all the household chores, the cooking, the cleaning, all that stuff, which has changed because men have taken on that more of those roles. But do you think that women are going to go, no, what I do has been, way more valued over the years. I'm not going to give that up.
Yes, I do. Let's have some nuance here, Graham.
Okay, sure. Nuance me.
Let's have some nuance here. A woman who has a wonderful career and knows she needs to work really hard at that career to make it to the top, if that's where she wants to go, she knows that she benefits if she's interested in having a family at home, having kids. She knows she benefits from having a partner, a male partner, to be the father of her kids and to be a person who she can rely on at home, to be loving those kids as much as she does. So that Please don't interrupt. Please don't interrupt.
Okay.
Thank you. She benefits from knowing that her husband loves the kids as much as she does. Not every woman has a fabulous career that she is really dedicated to. Some women just have jobs. They go to work at 9, they come home at 5, they're watching the clock all day. They're not thrilled about their jobs. They're working the jobs because they got to work the jobs. They need the money. Where does she get her happiness and her identity from? Largely, it's probably by being the mother. You even will hear women say, well, I'm the mother, and I want you to help. I want you to babysit. I'm the mother. Even more to the idea of nuance here, and not painting in huge, broad strokes that apply to every woman. There are some women who don't even have 9-to-5 jobs. Their identity is entirely in being a mother. So yes, it's true that women with fabulous careers are probably very happy to have men at home, wanting the man to be at home and being fully invested in his new role that we are making available and encouraging men to accept. There are many other women who are not interested in sharing their primary role as the parent, the mother, I'm the mother, with a man. They're interested in having the man there to help out, but not to be primary.
Okay. So, first of all, let's just go back to this idea, because you then introduce this idea of women in the workplace, right? Having careers. But that's not what we were previously talking about. And if it wasn't for feminism and women wanting, there being some women wanting to get out of the house to go and work and have a career, that would have never happened. Now, I challenge you to go and talk to modern, and I'm talking about people with kids in the age of, say, newborns to even, I'm going to go up to 20 years old or even older, where the parenting is not considered equal, that there are women that are saying, no, 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 I don't want you involved in the parenting, and that there are men who don't also embrace that role, that role has now become of parent. There is becoming more equality in that. And I also think that comes from a female perspective saying, hey, I need you to start picking up some of the slack around here as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, actually, it also came from a male perspective because I was born in 51. Betty Friedan wrote her book, The Feminine Mystique, in 63. I was getting into puberty and into my late teens when feminism was really taking off. And I remember that there were a lot of men who were very, very happy and supportive at this idea of breaking down sexist expectations. Because there were plenty of men, even back in the 60s and early 70s, who were saying, this will be great for me because I don't really like all this pressure I'm under to make almost all of the money for the family. And it'll be great for me because I really would like to spend more time with my kids. Well, feminism didn't turn out that way. It didn't turn out to be bilateral. It was very unidirectional. There are a lot of men, and I think a lot more than we think there are, who would like very much to call to the forth, call to the top of their psyches, their nurturing instinct, their capacity to be loving and empathic with their kids, because they value the importance of connection. They value the importance of relationships. And the opportunity for a man to go and find his fulfillment by being that kind of non-traditional person is also, we don't know how strong it is because we don't ask the question. And if we did ask the question, we'd have to ask it very skillfully because of this idea that men are so lucky to be out in the world digging ditches and working in factories, and that's the manly thing to do, and aren't they lucky for being able to do it? They're not going to jump forward and say, yeah, man, I really would like to stay at home and be with my kids more. There's a lot of shame that might be involved in that, but there are men who would like to have that option, just like there are women who would like to have the option to be lawyers and doctors and astronauts.
So, Jack, I do not think we are in disagreement. In fact, I fully agree with what you're saying. There, I think, are two contentious points we're having is, one, how we got to this situation, right? Because I'm not blaming feminism for this issue, right? In fact, I'm saying feminism actually helped men become more empowered into these things that you are speaking of, right? And two, I also believe, Jack, and please don't take this the wrong way, I am of a very different generation than you are. And to my peers and to people I know, these issues of which you speak, and I'm talking about men, there are not limitations. There is not social stigma if a man decides to want to stay at home. A lot of that has now been erased. So I think what we need to do is move on and move to the primary idea of what you are advocating for, which is, a new definition of masculinity in the modern era.
Okay, thank you. So you raised 2 points. The first one I think I can dispose of pretty easily, which is the idea of the generational divide, how things are so different for younger men. Not true. Not true. Because guess what? Divorce still happens even for young men. And so, yes, it can be very true for a woman to say, "Oh, I want you to be I want you to be a fully equal husband," until she doesn't want him to be the fully equal husband, because now when there's a divorce, she might want to move away. She might have a new boyfriend, and the man in some states has a fair chance, without spending $150,000, of maintaining his relationship with his kids. But the men at the bottom of the hierarchy don't. The woman wants to leave him. He's a bum. He's no good. She's afraid of him. He's violent. He drinks too much. Whatever stereotype you want to
But that's a
raise.
one-sided definition of how divorce happens. Divorce doesn't just happen, men divorce women as much as women divorce men. I'm sorry.
Not
That's
true.
just the way.
No, that's not true, Graham. That is not true. And your stereotypes are speaking volumes. Your
Okay, well,
anti-male
I could say the same
stereotypes
thing
are
to
speaking
you
volumes.
as well. I could see to you as
Well,
well.
I don't have many anti-male stereotypes. I don't have many
No, yours are
anti-female stereotypes.
anti-female stereotypes, I
No,
do believe. I think
no,
I will
no.
let the listeners judge at the end of the day.
I recognize that there are both good women and not so good women. And actually, I also recognize that there have been two types of feminism that we really need to distinguish. There's the Betty Friedan type of feminism, and then there is modern feminism, current feminism. The kind of feminism that has very recently been in the state legislature of my state, proposing laws that say, do you know about parental alienation? You ever heard that
No,
term?
tell me.
Okay, well, it's a very, very big problem for young fathers today. Parental alienation, you probably have experienced it or intuited it. You just don't know the term. But parental alienation is the attempt by a parent to influence a child to turn against the other parent. Now, men also attempt to parentally alienate kids from their mothers, but it is more likely to happen in the other direction, that the woman attempts to get the kid to think daddy doesn't love you and I'm the one who loves you, so just love me more. Parental alienation is a very big problem now. We can imagine, without being too science fiction-y, that it probably happens a fair amount. Modern feminism, today's feminism, not what I consider to be real feminism, denies that parental alienation ever happens, that it's junk science, it's a myth, it does not happen. Now, what they do with parental alienation is very much like what they do with domestic violence. Are you aware that domestic violence is roughly, I'm not talking about the amount of damage done, physical damage that's done, but are you aware that domestic violence is roughly a 50-50 proposition as to who initiates it? Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, but I'm pretty sure I know who wins it.
Okay, so you are talking about wins it in terms of physical musculature, okay? You are not talking about the element of surprise, attacking a man when he's asleep or sick or at the top of the stairs so she can push him down. You're not talking about weapons.
Okay. But I don't have the facts in front of me. But Jack, I think we're getting way off topic here. But I don't know.
It goes to the heart. It goes to the heart of the stereotypes. It goes to the heart of the stereotypes, because modern feminism, current feminism, has weaponized the problem of domestic violence against men. It would take a very brave judge to hear a woman say, "Your Honor, I'm afraid of him. Keep him away from me and the kids." Because the judge knows how politicized and ideologized the issue of domestic violence has become. It is one of the ways in which modern feminism is attempting to keep men from gaining equality in the realm of parenting and nurturance. It's a hoary old stereotype that is used to maintain a status quo that they don't want to give up.
Well, I don't, as I said, I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm not
Well,
saying I'm not saying there aren't instances of female violence towards men, but I also want to go back to your idea just a second, Jack, where you're talking about feminism. And I kind of want to get off this topic because I want to start maybe advocating for some of the positive things that you want to do. But, you talk about feminism and these laws that are being in place that are, empowering women. The United States of America has yet to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, if I was a woman, I'd be pretty pissed off about that. And this is where you go back to, feminism as sort of being a rebellion. Well, of course, all major changes start with the rebellion and start with, actions that have to be more extreme in order to make change.
and the people who are being rebelled against never like it. And I am telling you that what we are experiencing now is a backlash against men's attempt to stage the rebellion that we need to gain equal access to the traditionally female sphere of influence and opportunities for happiness. We need it to go in both directions. It's all it's about. Look, it's understandable that men resisted women's equality in the workplace because we had so much invested in it. It's what made us men. It's how we proved our worth. It's how we showed our love for our families. The mistake was that some women, went over the top and said, the reason you don't want to share what you've got in the male domain is that you're male chauvinist pigs. It was a little rough. We don't need to say that women are female chauvinist pigs. We just need to say, look, you've got this advantage. We're against sexism, right? We don't like it in either direction. Here's what we need to do, because you might not feel it very much, but we men feel it a lot, the ways in which we're disadvantaged where you have advantages. In the spirit of love and progress for the human race, in the spirit of advancing civilization, in the spirit of giving men ways to manifest their humanity other than these old-fashioned ways that lead them into so much trouble and violence and ill health and ill mental health. We really need to ask you, even though it's not immediately in your self-interest, it's in the long-term self-interest of our whole species and in your kids and your grandkids, that you be willing to give up some things that are currently in your favor.
But that again has to go both ways. So my point, what I exactly, Jack, but I feel that perhaps your message would be more accepted if instead of taking this sort of antagonistic view towards feminism, which certainly has pros and cons, but certainly has its history as to where it's gotten to. And instead of that, eliminate that whole thing from your pitch. Let's get rid of discuss. Let's just talk about, let's find a way for men to be healthier. And let's not blame feminism for the ills into which we find ourselves.
If I were more conciliatory, I wouldn't be here. Nobody would be interested in having me on to talk about, well, and I couldn't really even do it. Let me tell you where I started with all of this. So I told you in 1982, I got the idea for the radio show. In 83, I did the radio show, did it till 89. In 1994, I had a book published. Now, You want to talk about being conciliatory? Here we go. I did a book of interviews with 22 women, most of whom identified themselves as feminists, but real feminists, Betty Friedan feminists, who were ready, willing, and able to talk about not just the disadvantages of being female, but the advantages, not just the advantages of being male, but the disadvantages of being male. A book of 22 interviews along those lines. The book was called Goodwill Toward Men, published by St. Martin's Press, 1994. Just as the book was being published, the female staff of St. Martin's Press decided they don't like this book. I said, have you read it? No, but it's reactionary. It's reactionary. The book got canceled before canceling was a thing. And so, the idea of being conciliatory in the face of people who are hostile, it's a losing proposition. I don't need to be hostile. I just need to be honest. And I need to say, you're not going to like this, but you're really being unfair.
Jack, I just wanted, because I think that is a perfect place to stop talking specifically about feminism, and let's now start talking about the solution. You sound monothetic, because
that's fine.
You can't get past that. What are we going to do? What are men ourselves? If we want to empower ourselves, what are we going to do to change this situation that you are talking about, that we somehow don't have enough influence in the household sphere?
Can't do that. We have had 60 years of men changing.
60 years again. You bring up 60 years. That's like a spit in the ocean, my grandfather would say.
Well, let's see. It's 2/3 of my life. It's the full life of the last.
But we're talking about humanity.
You interrupted me again. You're interrupting me again.
Well, sorry, Jack. Unfortunately, I got to get some words in edgewise sometimes.
It's a full 3 generations of boys and young men. That's what 60 years is. It's not nothing.
But what are we going to do? Let's move forward. How are we going to change it?
So what are we going to do? We're not going to continue saying to men, you need to change and you need to make this happen. No, men can't. Women, in the spirit of fairness and justice and equality, will you work with us here?
Okay, and so let's get to the nuts and bolts of it, because you're basically, in some respects, saying that men are not empowered to make these changes themselves, that we are solely reliant upon, the discretion of women to change our relationships in fatherhood, in the definition of masculinity, in what, as you say, these traditionally female roles. So what are the nuts and bolts that we're going to get there, besides complaining about feminism, deriding that, and let's find a way to move forward? Please tell me what you have as your master plan for this.
So what is my master plan? It's kind of not very reasonable for you to ask me, what is my master plan? The master plan is going to be completed and executed long after I'm dead. It's going to take a long time to make the changes we need to make, because
more than 60 years?
Because guess what? We're going to see a lot of digging in of the heels. We're going to see a lot of retrenchment coming from places like you, who just cannot get past the idea that men have had a lot of power. And so we need to keep beating on men to change.
What do you suggest we can do to solve these issues?
Could I have done anything more along those lines than do the book that I did?
I feel badly that your book got canceled, but people need to move on and find the solution.
Yes.
So what is the solution?
And I have moved on, and I continue to move on to say, this is still at work today. This is still happening today. I don't move on by saying, oh, well, I'll just have to forget about that. No, it's not just about what happened to me. It's what's happening in the culture.
Okay, so let's agree that this is happening in the culture. Let's agree, right, to that. Where to
Well,
next? What are we going to do?
What is the this? What I'm going to start an operation called Male Friendly Media, and
Yeah.
I'm going to have a YouTube channel, and I'm going to have a Substack blog, and I'm going to do a lot of podcasting. That's what I'm going to do.
I know, but I still haven't
is that good
heard.
enough?
No, that's just a means to get your message out. I want to know more of your message to how we're going to solve the problems that you have identified that men are experiencing.
How we're going to do that?
Yes, how,
Well,
please?
I have spoken pretty clearly, I think, to the need for men to ask women to cooperate in this.
Okay, so say they say yes, so they're going to cooperate. So
No,
then
they're not
what's
saying,
next?
No, it's not. No, that's not happening. They are not saying yes.
I'm not really hearing any solutions for men to help solve the problems that you've identified. All I'm hearing is you're blaming women for not allowing men to do these things that they want to do.
Yeah, well, you're very
That's
much
it.
about blame. You're very much about blaming men. I get that.
No, I'm blaming you. I'm blaming you
okay.
specifically, Jack, for not giving me answers to the problem you've identified. That's the problem.
And I'm a man who is saying things that are quite defensible around the point that women are not perfect. Women are human.
Never said they were. They are.
I never said you said they were. Okay. I am a person who is not interested in blaming. I'm interested in solving the problem. You seem to be the kind of person who, when we talk about women maybe making some changes, I'm accused of blaming women.
But you haven't given me any solution, Jack. The only solution you have said is women need to change, point blank, end of story. Okay, so what do they need to change? And how can we help influence that? Okay. What can we do? What can we do? I want some
When you say
practical steps.
Who's the we? Men?
Everybody.
You have not really listened very well to what I've been saying. Because, Graham, I did say what we need to do. One of the things that needs to happen is that we need to ask women to take account of the ways in which they have been raised to believe they are superior to men. That was a very important part of the women's movement. It was an essential part of the women's movement for men to sort of relent on the idea that we were superior to women. And so I'll say it again. One of the things we need to do, Graham, is to have the confidence and the integrity to say to women, look, you're not going to like this, but you really, in the spirit of fairness, have to take account of the stereotypes you have about how great you are and about how ungreat we are. That's essential. That would be a really good first step. I don't see that happening anywhere.
Okay. So first step achieved. What then would be the second
It's step? Not achieved. It's not achieved.
I'm saying hypothetically, Jack. So all you have is this one thing. You're holding on so tightly to this one thing. So what happens next? What happens next?
That is such a crazy question, Graham.
I don't think so. I think it's called a logical progression.
It's a very shallow, two-dimensional question. What would have to happen in that first step for us to be ready for the second step?
Tell me.
And it's going to take a lot of goodwill, a lot of humility, a lot of changing the economics of the equal rights movement, because right now there are lots of professional feminists who make their living. You're shaking your head. Are you shaking your head? No?
Because you're not moving on. I'm sorry. I just feel like a hamster in a wheel at the moment.
Well, it's interesting that I'm not going in the direction you want me to go, so I am not moving on. For me to be moving on, I have to go where you want me to go. No, It's not where I'm going. It's not where I think we need to go.
But you just keep going on about
You
this
keep going on too, Graham. You keep
No, I'm
going
trying
on
to move
too.
forward to another
No,
topic, anything
no.
other than how feminism is beating down men and keeping us under the heel. Because I just actually don't believe it's true, as a matter of fact, Jack. I
Then you
really
need to
don't.
get educated, Graham. You need to get educated.
I think you need to move on
Yeah,
and see
move
a
on.
modern life because it isn't what you're perceiving.
It is. It is. It is. There are some very bad things out there happening to men.
What is it that you think men need to do in order to be more fulfilled in their lives?
I reject your question. What do men need to do?
What do men
That's
want? What do you think is lacking in men's life that make us feel unfulfilled? How's that for
relationships, relationships,
healthy relationships
relationships,
with everybody, anybody, whom?
everybody,
Okay.
whomever they want to have relationships with.
And what is causing men to not have healthy relationships
Oh,
or just relationships?
it must be men. It must be men
Well, why
because
not
they're
men with
still.
men? Why relationships between men and men should be an equal
I said
proposition,
with
shouldn't it?
everyone. Didn't I say
Okay.
with everyone,
You
Graham?
did, but you're saying
Yes.
they're lacking relationships. So why can't men have better relationships
Who said they
mano a
could?
mano?
Who said they could?
Well,
Who
you
said they
just
couldn't? Who's
you kind of
Graham?
implied it because you're saying
Where's
that
this
you're
coming
having
from?
problems with everybody. It's coming from you. I'm trying to get some
I said
information, Jack, that's helpful, that's
relationships
other than
with
just being
everybody.
okay.
Relationships
Everybody
with
are
everybody.
males part of everybody. Are males part of everybody?
I never excluded them.
Okay. So if men are, as you say, missing relationships, how can men have better relationships, men to men? Friendships. Let's just start there.
I don't want to start there. Graham, you are trying to keep attention from the crux of the problem. The problem
I'm
that
trying to
men
make
are.
you an expert in some sort of a field other than complaining, Jack, because all I hear from you right now is a victim. You sound like a victim. You were a victim
Can't be a
about your
victim.
book. Your
Yep.
book was published. You
Yep.
already said you were a victim of that. So, how are you going to get out of your victimhood and this perceived notion you are promoting that men are victims to feminism that is somehow stopping us from fulfilling
Yeah.
our
Men,
malehood? Can
men,
you please?
men can never be victims. Men can never be victims because
Didn't say that. Didn't say
they
that,
don't want
Jack.
to. They don't want to wallow in their victimhood.
You
A
seem to be
man's
doing a
a
good job of
man's.
it.
There you go. That's
I'm
it's
sorry, Jack. I've
it's
given you so many opportunities to
no.
just
You've
move
given
on.
me a bunch of baloney, a lot of negative stereotyping of men.
Okay. But what I'd like to focus on though is let's say those two things happened, right? The two things you're proposing were achieved. What next? What then
Well,
would you like to see happen?
what would what would need to happen if the first thing really did occur? That women really did take account of the ways in which they believe they are superior to men, and the ways in which they believe they are therefore justified in having opportunities and advantages that are denied to men.
I don't know what, Jack. I'm hoping I'm talking to you as the expert, Jack. You are on this show as an expert,
Graham, there is something
and
there's something
you are
very
promoting
insincere,
this idea that
something very
you
insincere about your approach. To be invited onto a show to give a point of view and to have that rejected.
and I've had you allow you to tell your point of view numerous times, but I want to know more. You've reiterated those 2 points about 5 times, and then not given me what you want to achieve. What is the end goal for your desire for these things to happen?
If women truthfully, honestly, as fully as most men have, taken account of the positive stereotypes about them and the negative stereotypes about the other. That wouldn't happen, as I've been trying to say, as a two-dimensional binary thing. Many, many, many other things would occur. All of them would be good.
Okay,
They
can you
would,
elaborate on those things?
I think we've been doing that for 2 hours, or for an hour and 42 minutes.
No, I keep asking you to elaborate on it, and you keep telling me that I don't get it, but you haven't given me anything to get. Like I still need
Oh,
you
okay.
to come, like I
Let me
need
give
to
you,
know.
let me give you something to get. You'll like this. All of the problems between men and women are men's fault. Men's shorter life expectancies are men's fault. The fact that men are often, as you admitted, disadvantaged in divorce, that's men's fault. And so it's really only logical and sensible for men to be the ones that we continue to scrutinize and to ask for changes from.
What are you hoping then that as a result of these two things you've asked for, women to acknowledge that they aren't perfect and that we're going to get that legislation to allow men to have custody of children? After that, all of men's problems will go away. We're going to stop dying early. We're going to lead happier lives and we're going to be more fulfilled. Is that what will happen as a result of those two things? Is that what
Many,
you're hoping to go?
many
Well,
good things, many good things would happen if we were to achieve, the recognition of men's and women's essential equality.
okay,
Not
what would be some of those things? Could you list three things, good things that would happen as a result of that?
Men would live longer lives, men would live happier lives, kids would live happier lives.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I can definitely agree that children would be happier, right? And I think this comes back to, you did some work, you did some positive work. We go back and look at the history. You got your master's in social work. You then became a correctional officer at the Baltimore City Detention Center. You then became a parole officer. And then within the prison system, you worked on the National Fatherhood Initiative. So that's a program for incarcerated fathers to become better parents. So can you tell me some of the benefits that came out of that program?
Incarcerated men maintain better relationships with their kids. A major part of the focus of the program was that men are more than their money, that a man who does not have a job is not ipso facto worthless, that his love for his kids is important. It's important to the kids, it's important to the man. That's one of many things that
Okay.
I see occur when we recognize the intrinsic value of men as being equal to that of women, especially in the realm of parenting.
Okay. So what do you feel men can do currently now in the situation we find ourselves to be positive role models to children?
Okay, so what did you just say? What can men do? And I am trying to make the point to you, Graham, that it can't be done just by men.
So our men are helpless and are victims and cannot be
There
positive
you
role
go.
models
There's the
unless women.
insincerity. There is
But
the
that
insincerity of your approach. And you
I'm
roll
just
your eyes.
trying to
No,
reiterate
no,
what you're
Graham,
saying,
no,
Jack.
Graham, you really are trying to demean what I'm saying.
Well,
I
Jack,
never,
I wish you all the best, and I really hope that somewhere that this will make a difference. Listening to this podcast will make a difference in somebody's life. But I also hope for you, Jack, I really do, that you can come up with some concrete answers, practical things that men themselves can do on their own without relying on just changing women? If you can give those right now, please do. I would love to hear them.
So when men change, it's a good thing. When women change, or when women are asked to change, that's blaming women.
Can you give me some examples then of those ways that women think they're superior to men?
Uh, they're morally superior. They're more gentle. They're more kind. They're more caring. They're more loving. They're more generous. They're more empathic. They're more nurturing.
And you feel that men are already equally those things. We just need the opportunity to show this, but we're not being given the opportunity.
We are not recognized for it. We are not appreciated for it. When we do it, our motives are often misunderstood. That we're trying to show power or some such thing, some other negative stereotype of men. Yeah.
Okay.
And we have a lot of work to do.
Okay. I feel that men can and do show empathy and emotions both to women and to their children, right? But I don't see it as a power play, that it's being interpreted as a power play. Because I do think women have asked men to be more like this, and men have, over time, been changing and showing their emotions and giving the love that is needed to children. Because at the end of the day, to me, that's the most important thing, is raising of good children.
And there is some nuance that you just glossed over. You use very general terms because we're talking in generalities, but there needs to be the nuance included that there are many women who do not do what you just said women do. There are many women who really do not want to share their primary parenthood status with a man. I think some of the things you said would probably really hurt men's feelings.
Well, then...
And if men's feelings were more taken care of, I think women would be happier as well.
See, and this is my point, is I think that is your message, and I think there's truth to that. I just think the means in which you are trying to get that message across, and not providing ways for men to either get in touch with their feelings. You're the one that is saying that the situation that men find themselves in, being out of touch with their feelings or not able to express them, is all because of women. That is the crux of what you are promoting. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
You are wrong. You are wrong. Never said all because of women. These are multifactorial problems.
When I asked you what men can do, you could provide me no information other than women need to change.
May I continue? Never said all. What I say is the crucial element now. The next step now is to ask women to participate in this endeavor.
Okay. Well, the women I know are participating in this endeavor.
That's probably not a very scientific sample.
I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I hope you find the healing you're looking for the sadness you've experienced.
Yes. Okay. So you hope that I feel better by taking the approach you want me to take. And I'm telling you that I am going to feel better every day because I take the approach that I take.
Well, again, thank you for your time, Jack, and I wish you lots of luck with your endeavors, and have a great day.
Lots of luck with your podcast.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.
So for context, mine and Jack's conversation went on for over 2 hours, and there was some heavy editing required to get the interview to what you just heard. There certainly seems to be a much deeper story here to uncover with Jack, and hopefully another podcast host can get to the bottom of it. I did promise Jack that I would give his arguments equal representation, and I hope I achieved that. One of the two main points Jack is a huge proponent of is legislation for a rebuttable presumption of shared parenting. This concept is that when courts decide on custody during a divorce, they begin by assuming that a 50-50 parenting time split is in the best interest of the child. On this point, I don't disagree with Jack, but unfortunately, I edited out much discussion on this due to time restraints and because a clear definition of the legislation's intent was not provided. As I said in my intro, I was hesitant to publish this episode because as a podcast host, I don't know if it's my best showing. My intention is always to provide my guests a welcoming space to share their ideas. I would love to hear your comments on this episode, but please do so with respect to both the host and guest. Until next time, be sure to give your kids a hug and let's find ways to make this an equal world for both men and women. Take care.